Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Thinking Like a Bank, where we show you how to think like a bank using the same strategies and principles that banks use to help you find more financial freedom in your life. I'm your host, Sarah Ibrahim. So when I first got started in this industry, one of the components of financial planning that caught my attention was asset protection. And just like the title of that, it's the process of protecting your assets from various risks. And for entrepreneurs, those risks can be anywhere. They could be in taxes, in creditor risks, in trademark, intellectual property. There's so many different types of risks that business owners can go through. And that's what I wanted to make today's episode about. I have with us today a very special guest. His name is Attorney Dan. He's a father of three and husband. He's been practicing law since 2005, serving businesses and entrepreneurs in the areas of LLC and corporation formation, trademarks, franchising, and estate planning. He's the best-selling author of Don't Sue Me and Making Your Mark. And he's the host of the Intentional Entrepreneur podcast, which can also be found on YouTube under the name Legal Tips for Smart Entrepreneurs. He can be found at danxwin.com, and I'll include the link to that in the show notes below. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I love talking about kind of the various ways of protecting your business, setting it up correctly, all the kind of the technical parts. It's very interesting to me, and I think it's very important for people to know that and know how to kind of get that process started. But before we talk about those technical parts, can you tell us more about your background and how you got into the specific niche of the law?
Yeah, so when I was finishing college, we were kind of sharing our last, what are you going to do after graduation, type talk in one of our classes. And I told everyone I'm going to law school, and they asked, what area do you want to do? I said, I do really want to work with business owners, because I was a business major, and the business world always was very fascinating to me. And so when I was able to open up my own practice, I focused really on that particular niche of helping business owners, help them start, protect, and scale their business. And so that's where we are today.
And do you think your undergrad, so you got an undergrad degree in business, right?
Correct.
Do you think that undergrad degree helped you in your business practice today as an entrepreneur?
For the amount I paid for it, it should have. But, I think like anything in life or anything in the formal education, you kind of learn on the fly, right? Sure. Like I think there was some foundational stuff, like maybe learning how to learn. I think that's that's probably what I learned the most out of going to school, is like how am I best to absorb certain material and then apply it to the facts I have in front of me. So I think that's where I get the most value out of my education. Not so much like, hey, I read this from a book and then I do this, this particular thing every day in work. So I think that's where I viewed most of my value of education.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I'm the same way. I got my MBA. And what I know today about business and finance and economics is probably 10% from my MBA and then 90% from real world experience. So I definitely agree. Let's fast forward to today, like on a day-to-day basis, what is it that you do?
Focus on really three areas of the law is entity formation, a couple areas: entity formation, trademarks, franchising, and estate planning. And the kind of part and parcel of the first three is I provide outside virtual in-house attorney services through a membership program. And so certainly with like entity formation, most people know it as like LLCs and corporations. This is really one of the first steps business owners take to protect their personal assets from the risk of running a business. Now through trademarks too, we secure those like names or slogans or logos for our clients, so that one, they're not being ripped off, right? This is something they're building a brand over time, so they're not being ripped off. Someone else is not taking their name or copying what they have in order to kind of steal clients. And so we help protect those types of intellectual property for our clients. And then also franchising. Franchising is a very it's very akin to selling securities. And as you probably know, there's securities is really heavily regulated. And so there's lots of T's that we have to cross and I's we have to dot in order for business owners who want to become franchisors to be legally allowed to sell franchise units in California and in other states. And then, of course, estate planning for not just for our business owners who are looking to protect their assets, make sure the assets don't go into probate, and then go on to the next generation, whoever they want that to be. to have that smooth transition so that there's no interruption of business to the next generation.
Very well said. Yeah, it makes very crystal clear. I get exactly what you do. I want to start from the top now. So entity formation, like that could be an LLC, it could be an S corp, it could be a C corp. I've heard of a lot of people just go to their Secretary of State website and they just create their own entity formation. Like a small business owner does this without any legal or accounting background. What do you think about that?
I think we've all been kind of I'm not trying to remember the word. That's kind of only one piece of the puzzle, right? And I will, when I do it for my clients, I go to the exact same place. I go to the Secretary of State, but that is only step one of at least 10 steps that they have to do. And so I was actually cleaning up another client's entity. What happened was they had filled out their own. They got their own tax ID number. They went through one of these large kind of do-it-yourself companies.
Yes.
And then they sent me all the documents. After a couple of years, they said, "Hey, we want to do this, this, and this." So I said, "Okay, send me your documents so I can see what I'm working with right now." And in that set of documents, there's a kind of a to-do list by the business owner. So this company says, "Hey, all right, your company's filed with the Secretary of State. We got the tax ID number for you. You can open your bank, but you need to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. These are the next steps you need to do." This includes getting an operating agreement, say for a LLC or bylaws for a corporation, issuing the shares, issuing ownership through either subscription agreement or stock purchase agreement, and then issuing certificates, evidencing the ownership, and creating a ledger for your corporate book. And then in California, those entities are required to file for a securities exemption, because technically, ownership in those particular companies, that constitutes a security for California law. And so there's a thing that you actually do have to file with the California Secretary of State for that. But business owners, like, they're too busy kind of running their business. They see this checklist. All right, that's something I'll do, at a later time. But honestly, 9 times out of 10, people don't end up doing it. And where it really comes to bite them in the butt is if they end up getting sued, other side's gonna want to see these particular documents. And if you are not up to date on your documents, that could really, there's a term called piercing the corporate veil. So like that alone doesn't necessarily expose your personal assets to liabilities of the business. But it's like one check in that particular column, and you keep adding all those up, you're going to give them a big old wide hole to go after your personal assets to satisfy the judgment. And so I get it. There's people, like, you can't afford to hire an attorney, but I would say if you have more money than time, you are an expert in what you do, you're an expert in making money. How your clients, how your customers pay you to do what you can do for them, right? Think of it the same way that a professional can do for you, that you can shortcut the process and give you, at the very least, the peace of mind that your company is set up properly.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I've heard of that term, piercing the corporate veil. Is that because the entity wasn't properly structured, so it loses it loses separateness? Is that the right term?
Yeah. So another term is called alter ego, right? Just a different identity. And what the plaintiff will say is that, hey, the LLC is owned by John Doe, and John Doe is really the LLC is just an alter ego. It's just a regular identity. He doesn't separate his life to the LLC, right? So he's not keeping up with his corporate books. He's commingling his bank account. He's paying his personal car payments out of the business, out of the business checking account. He's paying his home water bill out of the business checking out. So you're absolutely right. You need to maintain separateness between your personal stuff and your business stuff in order to take advantage of the corporate law shielding personal liability from your business liability.
That makes sense. Okay. And then do you think that going through like a third party like website, like a large company website is a good idea, or should somebody go to like an individual like attorney like on a personal level?
Take it for what it's worth because I'm the one saying it. Um, I always think go to the professional. One is like you don't know what you don't know,
Yes.
and a lot of these websites, like if I went to the website, I would know the implications of each question
Yes.
that they're being asked. And what I will commend the websites that they're very good at. They're really good at presenting this particular forms in a kind of a layperson format so that
Mhm.
anyone can file it. Really, they're really just really explaining the forms a lot better, right? And I think this is where us as lawyers haven't done a great job is like explaining it in non-legalese.
Uh-huh.
And so, um, but if you kind of realize, hey, you don't know what you don't know, and you want to get done properly and as efficiently as possible, and from A to Z, because you you won't get everything that you need get done and signed, sealed, and delivered. This is also one of the things like you can buy all the upsells that they give you because that's how their sales funnel works.
Mhm.
But you still have to put pen to paper for it to be effective, right? And it's actually not just these onlines, right? A lot of accountants do this, right?
Yes.
And so they can pull they can pull the forms, they can file it, they can get the tax ID number. They'll probably just pull a generic operating agreement.
Mhm.
They may not, but they may just shove the whole thing to the client and say, all right, here you go. You got to sign this and this.
Mhm.
For what we do at our office, we get everything signed, and so that it's properly set up. Actually, I was dealing with another client, and his accountant did it, and he was actually going to go into a very large project, which it was really important for these particular documents to be properly done and in order and evidencing who owned it. But there were particular changes that the client wanted, and on a technical level, the accountant did make those changes, but there was some internal stuff that wasn't all lining up, and it would have caused a lot of problems for them down the road because it wasn't all structured properly. And so I think as attorneys, we're actually trained. We call it issue spotting, but it's like we're trained to think about, okay, what are the implications of doing it this way and this way? And if it's a negative implication, how do we set it up so you're not impacted or at least minimally impacted by the situation? And so what we try to do is, think of all the scenarios. What's your purpose, right? What are you forming this for? What issues are we going to foresee? Okay, and then bake that into the plan moving forward on creating the company.
That makes sense. I'm sensing like a lot of attorneys are usually risk averse, right? They're thinking of like the problems that could happen and then how to move away from those problems and taking as little risk as possible.
Yeah. And so this is kind of the dilemma between lawyers and business owners and entrepreneurs, because business entrepreneurs by very nature, right? You go on your business, that is non-risk adverse, right? They're taking a chance.
Yes.
And so us as lawyers, we have to kind of take the opposite, right? We're risk management, risk mitigation.
Mhm.
There's like anything, there's always a risk, and a lot of people, business people, hate lawyers because we're always like trying to kill the deal. But honestly, the approach I've always kind of taken it is to like, hey, I can't make the decision for you,
Yes.
but what I can do is help you make an informed decision, right? So
Mhm.
if there's a 10% chance of this thing particularly happening, then kind of factor that in decision making, right? This is not for you to do it or don't do it, but just understand this is kind of part of the decision making process. And ultimately, the client makes the decision. Obviously, like we're as attorneys, we're actually always afraid like the clients will sue us and
Yes.
things like that, right? And we have malpractice insurance. But there's always that dichotomy between business owners and the lawyers that represent them to manage their.
Yeah. So what is it like? 80% of lawyers are sued at least one time during their whole lifetime of practicing law. Some sort of crazy stat like that. I mean, it's up there with surgeons and other professionals. So it's not just attorneys. It's also I think it's any professional who deals in a a very sensitive area of human lives, like surgeons and accountants and attorneys. So a lot of responsibility, in other words.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know the exact statistics, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
be surprised on that one. And
Yes.
so obviously we, like surgeons, attorneys are put in a position of trust.
Hmm.
So, our clients rely on us, to bring forth accurate or as accurate as possible information. We can't predict the future, but
Yes.
what we can do is we kind of can look at the past. But here's the patterns, right?
Hmm.
And this is what might happen, but you never actually know what happens. Well, at least with 100% certainty.
Exactly, and that's another thing too, is that it must be difficult where like you're thinking in your head like I could take on this case, I could win, but I can't tell the client that I can't tell this is exactly what's going to happen. So there's a kind of this balance where like you have to convey confidence, obviously, like all right, I know what can happen, but you can't guarantee it, obviously, because you don't know. And this is more of like litigation, right? This is more of like you go to court and like battling things.
Yeah, no, even in non-litigation cases, which is what I do,
Yes.
by our rules in our state, we're actually not allowed to guarantee an outcome.
Okay.
And so, we can say we can probably give chances, but we can't say, hey, I guarantee that you'll get this result.
Yes.
It's actually illegal for us to do it.
Okay. Now I want to kind of go into the next part, which is trademark. What is a trademark?
Yeah. So, if you've heard the term ultimate driving machine, what do you think of
Ultimate what?
the ultimate driving machine?
Ultimate driving machine. I'm not sure.
I'll pick a new one. Just do it.
Oh, Nike.
Right? Yeah. So that's Nike has done so well at branding itself, right, with
Yes.
that particular slogan. And so, like, that no one, if someone else try to do it, you would, and you heard that term, you would immediately think Nike, not this other particular product or service, right? And
Yes.
so that's really what a trademark is. It's just like it's usually a name, a slogan, or a logo
Mhm.
that is attached to a particular product or service that when someone sees it, a buyer sees it, they know it's this from this particular company. So that's kind of the nerdy
Mhm.
the nerdy level explanation. But in the context of kind of the most common intellectual property, there's trademarks, which is protects the names of slogans and logos mostly. There's patents,
Mhm.
which are protects inventions.
Mhm.
And then there's copyrights. Those are usually for like movies and books. Those are usually the most popular examples of copyrights. But for trademarks, it's usually there's usually some business component to it.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's something that's also visual, right? Like something you could see a design, and then you would trademark it, and then when you trademark it, you own the rights to the colors, the shape, the size, all those things, right? All those like dimensions. And then if somebody wants to use it, they would have to either license it through you or franchise it from you. And then if they don't, they're in violation of trademark laws. Is that about right?
Yeah, yeah. So if someone wanted to, the Nike swoosh, just kind
Yeah.
of going on the same example, right? That's very popular, known worldwide. If
Yes.
you wanted to use that, and they go through their licensing, like, I think what is it? What is it? Was it Lil Nas X who did
Mhm.
a collab with the sneakers, right? And then
Yes.
he did something, right? And then so they got all like mad at him because they used his. I mean, it was an agreement, but then he did something else, right? And they got mad at him
Yeah.
for doing it. So yeah, so they I think I can't remember the result, but technically they could have probably revoked his rights to use the swoosh, right, in
Yeah.
his collab. And so yeah, it is an asset. It's known as an intangible asset, right? You can't really hold it,
Yes.
but you can license it. That's a very popular way to monetize trademarks.
Got it. And I mean, it's probably a tough question, but like, if the audience here are mostly small business owners, how much on average does it cost to trademark, like, let's say your logo, your company logo, on average, how much would that cost from start to finish?
Start to finish, filing fees start at 250, 225, or 250. That's just the government fees. If you're looking to do it yourself, like speaking of, what we talking about with
Yeah.
with other ones, I think those are $100.
Yeah.
Now, if you're looking for a professional to do it to do it, for you,
Mhm.
I think around 2,500, 3,500. Now, all in, because in the
Yes.
trademark process, um, is the trade, we submit the application, and then it's assigned to examining attorney at the United States Patent and Trademark Office.
Uh-huh.
And so they have to do their own due diligence. They have to analyze, the application to see if there's any particular conflicts and issues with the application before issuing you the registration. Now, if there's no issue and goes straight through to registration, then really that's the only cost you have to incur for the application. Now, when there's renewals, obviously there's more additional costs. But sometimes the examining attorney will review it and go, all right, there's issues 1, 2, 3 here,
Mhm.
and I need you to address it before I could issue you the registration. So as attorneys, we have to go back and analyze. It's called an office action. Think of it as a soft objection letter, right?
Yes.
It's not totally outright rejected, but here are some things that you have to address before we have to move forward. And so for us as attorneys, if it's more complex, we have to do legal research. We have to go look at precedent, make um, legal arguments to why you should get yours moving forward,
Mhm.
right? And so I always tell clients, like, okay, if it's straight through, you're probably looking around 2,500, 3,000. If you get a lot of pushback, you're probably looking around 5 grand, 6 grand,
Mhm.
because there's a lot more work involved. And then and if you're really unfortunate and someone challenges your trademark, so
Yeah.
there's a 30-day window that someone can challenge it, then you have to basically defend yourself. So that can really increase the cost. So so there's no hard and fast rule, because every case is different. But I think I tell my clients, you probably want to budget around 5 grand, and if we can get it in sooner, then dude, that's everything else to kind of just keep it for you as gravy.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. And again, back to we can't guarantee, how much it's going to cost or what's going to happen. But yeah, it makes sense the way you put that together. Now, I was actually, when I was going through your bio, I was actually surprised when I read the part about franchising. I assumed that meant that, like, let's say that I wanted to be a franchisee and I wanted to go to I wanted to open, let's say, a McDonald's, I
Mhm.
would go to, I would go to you to review that agreement. But based on when we started this conversation, you help people actually become the franchisors. Is that right?
Yeah, I work more on the franchisor side. So people, business owners who created their own system that, maybe they got a couple of locations already, but now they want to essentially use other people's money, right, to expand the brand awareness of their company. So I help them navigate the franchising process and help them get set up properly so that they can sell those units to other people.
And then I'm assuming, like, that's a pretty tricky process because there's a lot of legal stuff you have to go through, right? When you are charging, like it's almost like a security where you're charging people um, to use your trademark, to use your name, to use your systems, and then they have to follow those rules after. It's not just the initial legal part, but also the ongoing operation. They have to follow. They might have to, like, if it's a restaurant, they might have to buy from your wholesaler or a wholesaler you're affiliated with. There's a lot of, like, rules, right, when it comes to, like, the ongoing process.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of disclosure. The document itself is called a franchise disclosure agreement,
Uh-huh.
right? Like who the owners are, if there's like any bankruptcy, if there's any litigation. Um, a lot of franchise systems, they have like a proprietary products, like they
Yes.
got to sell, like the branded cups, or even particular recipes, like ingredients, right, that they can't get anywhere else. That's
Yes.
still, buying those things have to be disclosed. It is taken to a mix of both federal law and state law. So
Okay.
there's lots of laws that have to be considered when preparing the documents. And then in a handful of states, the franchise system offering has to be registered with the state. So like California, Washington,
Yeah.
New York, there's a couple of states that, like, you have to send it to the documentation to the state, and then they have to review it, and then the offering has to be approved by the state before you can start selling it in that state.
Okay. Now, speaking of states, are you only licensed in the state of California to help people with these services?
I am only licensed in the state of California for so trademark is federal law. So
Uh-huh.
I've helped people everywhere with trademarks. Um, I licensing sometimes deal with where I am physically. So I have clients all over the country
Uh-huh.
helping with different areas. Just kind of depends on area of law as
Okay.
to my competency. But I do have clients all over the country.
Okay, perfect. That was my question. Yeah. And then
Yeah,
back to the trademark, when you do file, it's through the US, what the USPTO, is that right?
that is correct.
Okay, and then that's a federal thing. So when you license it, so even if you did all the paperwork in California, it's not like somebody in Florida could now use your trademark. It's a federal thing.
Right, right. So there's two kind of systems. One is the federal trademark, which is kind of where you want to be 99% of the time.
Mhm.
If you can't be, or there's any particular strategic reason why you can't be,
Yes.
each state has their own system too for trademarks,
Uh-huh.
and so that's another avenue that you can take. And so, like I did for my other client,
Mhm.
excuse me, our federal application was taking a little bit longer
Uh-huh.
than usual, and so we strategically filed in California
Mhm.
so that they can secure that first. And so at the very worst case, then that they will at least have California, which is where their principal place of business is.
Got it. That makes sense. Mhm.
And to secure something rather than nothing.
Okay, that makes sense. And then if it's like a foreign brand, they would follow the same thing, right? They would go through the USPTO office for that for if it's a foreign brand.
Correct. Basically, if they want to
Uh-huh.
sell in the United States, like want to protect the name in the United States, they would go through the United States Patent and Trademark Office.
Okay, perfect. And then vice versa, if a US company wanted to go other places in the world, like for example, Apple, it's not like Apple's
Mhm.
only in the US banned. I'm sure it's banned in almost every country in the world, or
Correct.
not just patent, all types of intellectual property.
Right, right. So it kind of depends on which country. So um, there's there's some countries that are a party to what's called the Madrid Protocol. Basically, like, hey, all these countries agreed to hey, if you put an application or have a registration in one country, you do have some benefits, like trying to get to the other countries. So there's that, and then for those countries that are not part of that,
Mhm.
then we have to do what we call in country. You have to file directly in those particular countries.
God, okay. And this is probably where international law comes into place.
Correct. Yeah. So something like that, then we reach out to our international partners and say, all right, I've got a client who wants to file in Dubai. Hey, all right,
Yeah.
if we don't currently have partners there, then we'll reach out to our contacts and they'll make some recommendations.
Okay, that makes sense. Got it. Okay. Now, then the last subject I want to talk about is estate planning. So walk us through that. What does that mean, estate planning?
Yeah. So it really is the umbrella for for wills, for living trusts, for power of attorney, right? Advanced healthcare directives. Those are really the four kind of main core documents that every not just business owner, just kind of every person should have. Okay. And so you in your business, you probably have had maybe some clients go through the process of probate, which is a public process. It can be long and it can be very expensive. And so if you kind of want to avoid all that, you want to get proper planning in place, right? Much like you want to protect your family through life insurance, you got to get these documents in place so that in the unfortunate incident where you are incapacitated or pass away, then there's a plan in place to execute what you want to have done rather than the state. So I like to say, hey, everyone, whether they know it or not, everyone actually has a plan, an estate plan, one that you create on your own or the one that the state creates for you. So which one would you rather have?
Just so I heard that right, it goes through probate when you don't have like a will and a proper estate plan.
So certainly if you don't have a will,
Yes.
um, even if you do have a will, that will go through probate. So that's why having a living trust is really important if you are
Uh-huh.
looking to seamlessly transfer assets to whoever you want them to go to.
Uh-huh.
Because if there's a probate process, that is a court process, right? There's court filing fees involved and court process, then it can take a long time. you want to kind of bypass all that, you kind of do all your work in front. Think of it like if you're building a new house, right?
Mhm.
The most important person that is involved in the project is probably the architect.
Mhm.
Because if the plans are poor, or you just kind of going in blind, your house is going to be very poorly built.
And then when it comes to life insurance, does that mean that it should be owned by a living trust, or that living trust should be the beneficiary, or a combination of both?
It's really kind of that's kind of a personal
Uh-huh.
decision. So a lot of people have different situations. So the benefit of actually having the the trust as the beneficiary is
Uh-huh.
that, so like if you wanted to actually change the beneficiaries to all your stuff, right? You actually need to change it in one place, just in your living trust. But if you have if you married and you have kids
Mhm.
and you have life insurance and you leave it to your wife, but and then your kids as contingent beneficiaries,
Uh-huh.
um, but maybe you have like 3 or 4 policies, right? Then you have to change that on all of them, right? And
Yeah.
especially if you have, now that's just life insurance. Now you probably have some other, brokerage accounts, right, or
Yes.
bank accounts, right? So you got to change all of them. So the benefit of, and you can't do it for everything, right? But for most things where you can have the living trust as the beneficiary, if you want to make changes, you just make it in one place, and that's living trust.
Now, when it comes to like asset protection, what's your opinion on the asset protection behind cash value whole life insurance?
Obviously, cash value whole life, that's not for everybody, right?
Yeah. Yes.
The reality is really expensive,
Mhm.
relative to term. But for a very select few, right, for a niche people, I think it's a really it can be a very good asset protection vehicle, right? One of the things, kind of the big picture of asset protection is like any plaintiff with enough money, enough time can kind of break through any um, any structure you set up,
Okay.
right? So the idea is really just to make them difficult, right?
Uh-huh.
Think about like hurdles or roadblocks. So for people trying to get to your asset, you're just making it hard for them, so that either it's too expensive for them to do it, or 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 um, or they don't have enough time to go penetrate through everything. And so, yeah, cash value life insurance. Last time I checked that, that is a vehicle. That combined with everything, that's just one piece, right? That combined with all the other asset protection strategies, such as, using LLCs to hold real estate, things like that.
Dan, that's actually like the best example I've heard of asset protection, because so as I was doing research on this, it's one of our primary niches. I heard so many attorneys say like, all right, what you want to do is you want to do this trust, and then the language behind it is it's guaranteed to that it's going to work this way. And you're right, it's there is no way of like absolutely. There are ways to mitigate the risk and mitigate the chances of getting sued and losing your assets, but there really is no like one method of like 100% shielding everything. It makes clear sense that like it's just a matter of creating those obstacles and those hurdles between you and those risks, where it becomes more difficult to expose yourself.
I had one client that, we set up an out-of-state entity,
Mhm.
put some property into it. It was a multi-tiered structure, and for this particular person, they didn't want to elaborate, right? They had one particular goal that they wanted to achieve, right? It was kind of more of on a privacy angle, and so we set that up with that in mind. And I think he still has a pretty good structure as far as asset protection goes. But obviously, on a his won't, I guess, last as long as someone who's got like 3 trusts and 3 LLCs and all stacked up to each other in like 4 different states, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
so it really depends on what the client's comfortable with,
Uh-huh.
and obviously what the resources are, because there is a balance of, because it does cost to maintain all, on these complex asset protection structures, right?
Yes.
So like how much you want to spend maintaining it versus like how much is a risk, and can you supplement that or offset some of that with some insurance. And so my particular approach I like is a little combination of both the legal structures and insurance, to give you a little bit of both worlds. Because if you had no insurance and you end up getting sued, or your company gets sued, you still have to put out the money to defend yourself. And,
Yes.
you could win, right? But you just got to pay your attorney's fees still. And 90% of cases end up with a settlement where
Yes.
each side is responsible for their own attorney's fees. Now, if you have an insurance policy, with the right policy, you tender that claim to insurance company, and then they will hire their attorney and they will pay the settlement amount. And you're not out of pocket except the deductible. Now, the only downside is like they may drop you from coverage, but at least you're protected for that particular claim.
Yeah, exactly. And the level of protection, usually it's like for every dollar, it's like you could almost insure 1,000 times that. Usually, like for example, this is something we do umbrella insurance policy. So like if somebody has, for example, auto insurance and homeowners insurance, and they add an umbrella policy for like usually like $300 a year for like $1 million in coverage. So if something happens, if a liability stems from either them driving or their home, it could protect them. But now let's say they're a surgeon and they do something at work, they like cut somebody the wrong way or prescribe the wrong medication, then they can't use a personal umbrella policy to cover them, right? For at work. And that's an entirely separate subject.
I'm not sure. No one asked me that question. Whether a personal umbrella will protect their business. So that's something we probably can both look at and see. And obviously, right, it's dependent on the policy.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
how good the broker is. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, Dan, I really enjoyed our conversation. I could tell you're very knowledgeable and you know your stuff really well, and your clients are very lucky to have you and work with you. For future clients and for future prospects, how can they reach out to you and connect with you?
You can go to my website, danxnguyen.com. You can find me on YouTube, legal tips for smart entrepreneurs, and there's a way to contact me there. But I have a ton of videos there, so your listeners can watch all those videos there.
Awesome, and I'll be sure to add in all the links in the show notes below. Dan, thank you so much for being on our show, and I'm looking forward to having you back on.
All right, thank you so much.
To learn more about what we do and how we can help you grow more wealth, please visit www.finassetprotection.com. That's FIN assetprotection.com. The topics presented in this podcast are for general information only and not for the purposes of providing legal, accounting, or investment advice. On such matters, please consult a professional who knows your specific situation.